What's up, YouTube? This is my part 2 video. This is going to be how to improve your playstyle for players who are already at a high level, who can already outplay 90% of the casual Yu-Gi-Oh players out there. I already posted a video earlier on how to improve if you still don't feel like you're at a level where you can compete with the best players. But if you haven't, I'll post a link somewhere on this area. But let's get started. Okay, so you're already at that level. You already know all the top tier decks. You already know, key concepts like card advantage, playing conservative, things like that. Well, here's a couple new things that I think are going to give you a little bit of an edge, which we all need now because everyone is starting to get to the level we're at. Everyone's starting to get to the level where, we can play at a high level and think we're the best players, but in reality when we go to a YCS and you hit round 4 or 5, you're going to be playing people with the exact same skill level or maybe a little bit better than you. So how can you even that out? How can you gain an edge on your opponent? Well, the first thing I read, and it's a little shisty and it's tough when you're trying to have fun and play casual, but if you want to win you got to do it, and that is attitude and somewhat mind games with your opponent. Now a lot of people try and be clever with, they talk about their set mirror forces and how they lure their opponents into attacks or whatever. I'm not going to get into that. That's something that, you judge on a case-by-case basis. If someone looks like, they're pretty intelligent, then you don't even, waste your time with that, or maybe you try and play that to your advantage. Some people are good at mind games, some people aren't. But there's a couple key things you can do that don't even require that much level of thought that are going to give you an edge on your opponent just by throwing them on tilt. For those of you who don't play poker, going on tilt essentially just means getting emotional and letting that cloud your judgment. One of the easiest ones that I think can be applied, and that I'm probably going to start applying when I play in YCSs, is just to tell your opponent they misplayed. It's just as easy as this. You're playing, they made a play, and just out of nowhere, just, say something like, you actually misplayed that last turn. It's okay, I'll tell you about it at the end of the match. By saying that, you hit a little bit of their subconscious, a little bit of their self-confidence, just because now they're going to wonder, shoot, did I misplay? Now you have this kind of dynamic set up where you look like the pro who pointed out their play, and now they're going to have, not be sure on their own play, because no one's 100% sure that they're the best unless they just have won a ton of YCSs. And if you have, you're probably not watching this video for help anyways. So whenever you sit down to play someone you don't know, if they can, give you the impression that they're more pro than you, it's going to throw you into a scenario where you're afraid that they're always outplaying you. And as soon as you point out someone's misplay like that, you create that dynamic. You create that dynamic where I'm judging your plays, and now you have to think about what I think about your plays. If nothing else, it might just make you angry that I'm doing that, and again, throw you on tilt. Little things like that, I think, are going to be key now, especially with the game skill level starting to even out, where there's not so many amateurs anymore. I mean, there's a ton of ways to do this. You can just straight be an asshole sometimes. You can count people's extra decks. I'll throw people on tilt. I remember there's a guy who I think's hilarious. He's always nice to me. A lot of people hate him, but his name's Robert Nix. And he used to win a ton of tournaments. Lately he hasn't played as much, and lately he doesn't win as much. And I think one of the main reasons he doesn't win as much is he's not as much of a dick anymore. He used to sit and just talk to you about whether he should call a judge, whether he's got diarrhea. He would just go on and on during the middle of your play. And if someone's talking to you when you're thinking through a complex play, you can't think. And if you're getting mad at the person too, now you're just going to start putting cards on the field. You're going to get frustrated, and that can really turn a game into your, it can turn a good player into a bad player. Who doesn't want to play against more bad players? So keep that in mind, the next time you go to a big tournament, because remember, you're there to win. And now you don't have to be a huge dick, but you're there to beat your opponent. You're there to make that guy lose and feel bad, and to make yourself win and feel good. The next thing is an article that Jason Grabher-Meyer posted recently that I thought was really insightful and actually really helpful. It was a little long, but he posted it on a TCG Player, and it was defining tempo and explaining it. And he defined tempo as the amount of cards you're exchanging and the amount of cards you're committing to the field. Now, obviously, a fast or high tempo, I'm going to be doing a lot of 1-for-1 exchanges, a lot of 2-for-2s. If I'm playing Black Wings, using my Icarus a little more quickly, my Mystical Space Typhoons a little more quickly, just to keep the game simplified and to, just to keep the game fast. And or you could play the slow tempo. And most of the good/great players, will play a conservative tempo for a couple reasons. One is that when you play a conservative tempo, you extend the game out, and when you extend the game out, you give your opponent more chances to misplay and you more chances to outplay them. So generally, a good player playing a bad player is always going to want a longer game, because it's going to give them more opportunities to make up for any luck that might interfere with the game. So if you have open a terrible hand and your opponent opens a great hand, if you can extend the game, you can push them to a point where they're going to make a mistake, and your good plays will put you, at an advantage when you should have already lost. But you need to be able to switch those tempos out, and Grabher-Meyer points this out, that if you're playing with someone at an equal skill level and you push at a tempo they're not comfortable with, it's going to throw off all their plays. Especially since it's easy to get lazy and not really think through about what your opponent's trying to do to you. So if I'm playing you and you're trying to play a conservative slow style and I push fast, you might feel an immediate response that, oh, I have to push fast back because they're going to game me in 2 turns because they just put 3 monsters in the field. Now, you can't play stupid and you can't let yourself get Darkhold, but you can throw your opponent on edge a little bit just by changing up the game and maybe, I don't know, just keep being aware. It's just another thing to be aware of when you're playing these games. And I think at this point in the Yu-Gi-Oh tournament scene, you have to have as many tools at your disposal as possible. I think being able to control tempo, and I think it helps understand too. It helps your understanding of why you play certain decks. Like I can never play X-Sabers, and I'm not a big fan of Lightshorn. Now a lot of people call them skill-less. I don't think they're skill-less. I think that they don't have a lot of interaction with your opponent. So whereas if I'm playing plants and you've got back rows, I've got to respond to your back rows, and I'm going to set my solemns and books, and I'm going to have to use those at the correct times to your summons, and there's a lot of interaction going between us. But if I'm playing Sabers, I'm just setting to set up until I Cold Wave, load the field, and take cards from your hand, which interacts with you, doesn't interact with you at all. All I want to do is just, make my plays, as safe as possible. If I Cold Wave, what used to be Cold Wave Rescue Cat, there's no response you can have to that. There's nothing you can do, so there's no interaction. The same thing with Lightsworn, if I drop Cold Wave Judgment Dragon or Cold Wave Celestia, there's no interaction. Now, the thing that gives Lightsworn a heavy amount of skill is the honest Necrogardna and Synchro plays, because those do take a lot of interaction. And also because it's so hard to read Lightsworn because they have so many plays they can drop at you in any given moment. But anyways, the point isn't whether or not a deck's skillful, it's that some decks have different tempos than others. Plants are great in that they can play 2 ways. If they open really good, they can play super fast, super field control, and push the tempo and put pressure on your opponent. Or they can play slow by setting Raikos, preparing for Dandelion plays, or later Stardust plays, later Scrap Dragon token plays. They can play both ways. Zero, I feel like, is kind of like that too, although that's more of a sack deck in my opinion because of Future Fusion. Sams actually can kind of play with 2 tempos. They can play drop aggressive ton of cards, or they can play a little bit slower with Xian control and things like that. But you should be aware of that, and you should be aware of that when you're picking a deck, and you should be aware of that when considering what you're going to lose to, and even just mid-game, being aware of what's happening to the tempo and how this might be influencing your playstyle. Because if you're feeling that kind of a fight or flight because someone's pushing hard against you, and this forces you to misplay in response, if you're aware that someone pushing hard on you can create those emotions, then you'll be more aware and not be as likely, to make that same misplay that you would have made if you weren't aware. But I've made 2 videos now. I think that should cover you guys for a little while. I'm going to try and do something that Billy Break does with his videos, and that as soon as my videos hit a certain mark in terms of views, I'll just automatically make a new one just to force myself to keep making videos. But yeah, that should be it for me. I'll figure out the whole view thing later. Thanks for being a sub, and if you haven't subscribed, you should subscribe there or wherever. And thanks for watching, and this is Dr. Drew signing out.